All right, so welcome to the deep dive, the show where we take all the stuff you're reading and we try to figure out what it all means.
Really pulling out those key takeaways and helping you get to the heart of it all.
Exactly. Yeah, cut through all that noise and all the endless scrolling and give you that, shortcut to actually understanding something really deeply.
And today's deep dive is going to be a really interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're tackling a book that I know a lot of you are curious about, and we've gotten a ton of requests to cover it,
Right, yeah. The Courage to be Disliked.
by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga.
And this one's presented as a dialogue right between philosopher and a young man.
Yeah, it's a really engaging format, and actually the choice of dialogue itself ties into some of the core ideas of the book, which we'll get into.
Yeah. So what are we going to work with here in terms of sources? I know you've been digging through everything everyone sent over.
Yeah, so we've got excerpts for the book itself, of course, and then a bunch of those really detailed descriptions and reviews from Amazon and Goodreads.
Mhm.
Always love those Goodreads reviews.
Always helpful, right? And even a transcript from a YouTube discussion about the book.
Yeah, someone did a really great breakdown of the key ideas, and it's always interesting to see how other people are interpreting the same material.
Absolutely. And our mission today is to kind of synthesize all of that, right? So really understand the core principles of Adlerian psychology as they're presented in the Courage to be Disliked,
Yeah.
and then see how those concepts might actually offer a path to, greater happiness, a
Mm.
sense of freedom from maybe some of those things that are holding us back.
The past or maybe the expectations of others.
Exactly. Yeah. All that baggage. So shall we jump in?
Let's do it.
All right. So right out of the gate, this philosopher hits us with a statement that's kind of like, whoa, hold on a second.
It's a big one.
The world is simple and life is simple too.
And as you mentioned in your notes, the young man in the dialogue, he immediately pushes back on this, like, wait a minute, hold on. Are you
Right.
kidding me? Simple.
Yeah, he's like, is this like a child's view of the world, where everything's straightforward and there's no, bills to pay and jobs to worry about
Right. All those adult complexities.
and responsibilities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that tension right there is so relatable
Mm-hmm.
because we all kind of start out with that maybe naive simplicity, and then life kind of hits us and
Right.
things get a little more complicated.
Gets messy. Yeah. So, I mean, what's interesting here is that, the authors chose this dialogue format, right? It's not just the philosopher lecturing at us about how life is simple.
Right. And I think that's really crucial. It's not just about handing down wisdom. It's about engaging in this back and forth, wrestling with these ideas.
Yeah.
Because that's how real understanding happens.
Right. And it's interesting, the philosopher, he mentioned Socrates,
Yeah, he does.
who obviously was famous for his dialogues.
Right, the Socratic method.
And then Adler himself, the psychologist whose ideas this book is based on, he also believed really strongly in the power of conversation
Yeah, to kind of work through things,
to make those shifts.
to clarify, to challenge those assumptions. Yeah.
So this idea of a simple world, it's almost like a challenge, right?
It's
something
a-
to kind of sit with and question and see where it leads us. Now, one of the things that really stood out to me as I was reading this was this idea of teleology versus etiology.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Sure. Yeah. So this is where Adlerian psychology really diverges from a lot of other schools of thought. So think of it this way, like traditional psychology often looks to the past,
Mm.
right? To understand why we are the way we are.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what they call etiology,
Yeah.
focusing on past causes, trauma, those sorts of
Oh,
things.
right.
Adlerian psychology, on the other hand, it's all about looking at the present and the future.
Yeah.
It's called teleology. And it's about understanding where we're headed,
Okay.
what our goals are, and how our current choices are moving us towards or away from those goals.
Mm.
The philosopher actually pretty boldly states that past trauma doesn't directly dictate our present state.
Yeah. And I imagine that could be a really hard pill to swallow for some people, right? Especially for those who've been through, really difficult experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's where this idea can be so powerful, because it's not about denying the reality of those experiences. It's about saying that they don't have to define us,
Okay.
that we have a choice in how we respond to them.
So how does the book kind of argue against that idea that the past has this hold on us?
Well, he gives this example of a friend who's completely withdrawn from the world, won't leave his room.
Right.
And instead of asking, what happened to this person in the past that caused this,
Mm-hmm.
Adlerian psychology asks, what's the purpose of this behavior right now? What goal might this be serving? Is this person maybe seeking attention or avoiding responsibility, even if it's on an unconscious level?
So it's almost like flipping the script, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of saying, okay, this happened to you, therefore you are this way.
It's saying, okay, this is what you're doing now. What's the goal?
Right. What are you getting out of this?
And that can be a really powerful shift in perspective.
Absolutely. So it's not about saying that, difficult things didn't happen, but it's more about questioning whether those are the only explanation for where we are now.
Right. It's about recognizing that we still have agency,
We still have a choice.
even in the face of those experiences.
Yeah, and how we respond, right?
Yeah.
And then this leads to this other idea that I found so fascinating, which is that our emotions themselves can be seen as tools
Oh, yeah.
that we create and use to achieve certain goals.
Tools. How do you mean?
Like, are we saying that we can just whip up anger whenever we want something? That seems a little...
Yeah, it does sound a bit strange on the surface, but think about it like the philosopher uses this example of the young man getting angry at a waiter for spilling coffee.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And he argues that the young man didn't just spontaneously erupt in anger. He actually created that feeling as a way to make the waiter submit to his demands.
So it's almost like he's using his anger as a weapon in a way.
Yeah, it's a provocative thought, right? That there's this element of intentionality even in our emotional responses.
It's not just something that happens to us.
No.
It's something that we're doing.
On some level, yeah.
Wow, okay, so we're not just at the mercy of our past or our feelings then. This brings us to this idea of the courage to change and the concept of lifestyle. So it sounds like we're talking about how we can actually, take control and use this agency that we supposedly have.
Yeah, exactly. Adlerian psychology is often called the psychology of courage, and for good reason.
Right.
It's all about recognizing our inherent ability to make choices and to take action to shape our lives.
Yeah.
And this concept of lifestyle is really central here. It refers to those patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that make us who we are.
Okay.
It's our worldview, how we interact with the world.
So is it kind of like our personality then?
Well, not exactly.
Yeah.
The book argues that lifestyle isn't this fixed personality that we're born with.
Yeah.
It's a set of tendencies that we've developed over time. And because of that, we actually have the power to change it.
So if we're unhappy, then the book is suggesting that on some level that's a choice we're making.
That's a tough one.
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, but the philosopher suggests that even unhappiness can serve a purpose. It can be a way of staying in our comfort zone, even if that comfort zone isn't particularly comfortable.
It's familiar.
Yeah, exactly. Even if we complain about things, actually changing them can be really scary. So we might cling to unhappiness because it feels safer in a weird way.
Right. Even if consciously we're like, yeah, I want to be happy.
It's that fear of the unknown, right?
The fear of change.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So we might be holding on to our unhappiness to avoid the effort and the uncertainty of actually, making those changes.
And then the philosopher throws in another bombshell.
Oh, boy.
All problems are interpersonal relationship problems.
That is a huge statement.
It is. It really reframes everything.
Yeah. So are we saying that if we were completely isolated, all our problems would magically disappear?
Well, in theory, yes.
According to this perspective, the philosopher points out that even loneliness is a social phenomenon.
Right.
It's the feeling of being excluded or disconnected from others. So if you were truly alone, the concept of loneliness wouldn't even exist.
That's fascinating. It's like it's relational.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so things like work stress, family drama, disagreements with friends, it all boils down to how we interact with other people.
That's the idea.
And this leads us to, I think, one of the biggest fears that a lot of us have, which is the fear of being disliked.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We all want to be accepted, right? We want people to like us.
And Adler's perspective, as presented in the book, offers a really interesting counterpoint to that. He suggests that true freedom actually comes from not being overly concerned with what other people think.
So the courage to be disliked is actually the courage to be free.
To be authentic, yeah. To live in a way that's true to yourself, even if it means not everyone's going to be on board with that.
Even if you piss some people off.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, okay. So navigating all of these relationships, though, it inevitably brings up those feelings of inferiority, right? I mean, we all look around, we compare ourselves to other people.
Especially in the age of social media.
Oh my gosh, right? And we think, oh, I'm not as successful, or I'm not as good looking, or I don't have as many friends, or whatever it is.
So how does Adlerian psychology address those feelings?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the book stresses that those feelings of inferiority are subjective. They come from our own interpretations of ourselves and our place in the world. It's not like there's some objective measure of inferiority out there.
Okay.
And it makes this really important distinction between a healthy feeling of inferiority and an inferiority complex.
Okay, explain that to me.
So a healthy feeling of inferiority is that sense that, I'm not perfect, I have room for growth,
Yeah.
and that can actually be a really powerful motivator.
Right.
It pushes us to learn and to improve.
It's like aspiring to be better.
Exactly.
Mhm.
An inferiority complex, on the other hand, that's when those feelings become debilitating. It's that sense that you're fundamentally flawed or inadequate.
So one is like, yeah, I can do better. And the other one is like, I'm just not good enough.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay, and the book talks about the pursuit of superiority. What does that mean? Is that like trying to be better than everyone else?
No, actually, it's not about being better than others at all. It's about striving towards your own ideal self. It's this continuous process of self-improvement.
Okay.
And the book really emphasizes that life is not a competition.
Right.
So comparing ourselves to others is ultimately a recipe for unhappiness.
Yeah, that's a surefire way to feel bad about yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's about personal growth, not outdoing other people.
Yeah.
What about equality? The book touches on that too, right?
Yeah, it does. Adlerian psychology is really grounded in this idea of fundamental human equality.
Okay.
So we're all equal in worth and dignity, even though we obviously have different abilities and experiences and
Oh,
circumstances.
right. Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, and the key is to treat everyone with respect regardless of those differences.
To see everyone as a fellow human being. And this ties into the concept of power struggles too, right?
It does. We've all been there, those arguments or disagreements where it feels like it's more about winning than about actually resolving anything.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So how does the book suggest we deal with those?
Well, the advice is actually pretty simple. Step down.
Just walk away.
As soon as you recognize that you're in a power struggle, just opt out. Don't engage.
Don't take the bait.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the conversation about anger. Remember?
Yeah, where we were saying it's like a tool.
Right. The book sees anger as a way of trying to control or overpower others.
Hmm.
And it suggests that we can actually replace anger with language, with clear and respectful communication.
Which is often so much harder to do in the heat of the moment.
It is. But it's a skill that we can develop with practice.
Yeah, it's something to work towards.
Mm.
All right, so this idea of the separation of tasks, this seems like it's really crucial for navigating all of these relationships. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, this is one of the most practical and powerful concepts in Adlerian psychology. It's about recognizing the boundaries between what's our responsibility and what belongs to someone else.
Okay.
The key question is, who's ultimately affected by the choice that's being made? So, for example, whether or not a child does their homework, that's ultimately the child's task, because they're the ones who are going to experience the consequences of not studying.
So if a parent's constantly nagging their kid to do their homework, that would be an intrusion.
Exactly.
Okay.
The parent is stepping into the child's task, and that can actually be really counterproductive.
So it's not about being completely hands-off either, though, right?
Right. It's not about being indifferent or uninvolved.
Mm-hmm.
The ideal is to offer support when it's requested to be there for the child without taking over their responsibility.
So it's about finding that balance
Right.
between, supporting and controlling.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's about setting healthy boundaries in our relationships, not cutting people off, but respecting their autonomy.
And their own journey.
Yeah, and the book also points out that seeking those external rewards or that recognition, it can actually blur those boundaries.
It can, yeah.
Because we might start doing things to please others instead of really owning our own choices and actions.
And that can lead to all sorts of resentment and unhappiness.
Right. And all of this seems to be building towards this bigger idea of community feeling, which is something I know we've talked about before, but it's so central to Adlerian psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So what exactly does that mean, and why is it so important?
So community feeling is sometimes called Gemeinschaftsgefühl in German.
Right.
It's this sense of belonging and interconnectedness with others. It's about seeing other people as your comrades and feeling like you have a place where you belong.
Okay.
And this speaks to something really fundamental in human nature, right? We all have this deep need to connect, to be part of something larger than ourselves.
Yeah, and we see that in so many different ways, right?
We do.
People joining clubs or groups or teams or, finding their community online. It's this universal human desire.
Yeah.
But the book challenges us not to be too self-centered in this pursuit of belonging.
Right.
The philosopher says pretty bluntly, you are not the center of the world.
He doesn't sugarcoat it.
He doesn't.
So what are we supposed to do then if it's not all about us?
Well, the book encourages us to shift our focus from what we can get to what we can give.
Mm.
So instead of asking, what can I get from this person, we start asking, what can I give to this person?
And that's how we find that sense of belonging?
That's the idea. Contributing to the community however we can, that's what gives us a sense of purpose and worth.
So it's not just about being accepted, it's about actively participating.
Right.
And the book talks about, self-acceptance, confidence in others, and contribution to others as all being part of this.
Yeah, they're all interconnected. When we genuinely feel like we're making a difference, even in small ways, it strengthens our sense of connection and our own self-worth. And this idea of community, it's not limited to just our immediate circle either.
Yeah. Adler encourages us to expand our sense of community to include our neighborhood, our city, our country, even humanity as a whole.
It's almost like those concentric circles, right?
It is, yeah.
Expanding outwards.
Exactly.
Okay, so within these communities, the book talks about vertical versus horizontal relationships.
Yeah, this is a really important distinction.
Can you explain what that means?
Sure. So vertical relationships are those that are based on hierarchy. So there's a sense of one person being above the other.
Like a boss and an employee or a teacher and a student.
Exactly.
Right.
Horizontal relationships, on the other hand, are based on equality.
So everyone's on the same level.
Right. And the book argues that a lot of our problems come from trying to operate in horizontal relationships as if they were vertical.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you're constantly seeking praise from others, that's a sign that you're in a vertical mindset.
Because you're looking for validation from someone you see as being above you.
Exactly.
Okay. So praise, which we often think of as a good thing, can actually be problematic.
It can be because it reinforces that sense of hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And it can also make us dependent on external validation.
Right. It's like we need someone else to tell us we're good enough.
Yeah, instead of trusting our own judgment.
So what's the alternative then? What does a healthy horizontal relationship look like?
Well, instead of praise,
Yeah.
the book emphasizes encouragement.
Okay.
So encouragement is about expressing gratitude, respect, and appreciation without any judgment attached. It's about recognizing someone's effort and contribution without putting them on a pedestal.
So it's like saying thank you instead of saying you're amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's about fostering that sense of, I am useful, I am beneficial to the community as the basis of self-worth.
Instead of needing someone to tell us how great we are.
Right.
I like that. And, as we get towards the end of the book, it really digs into this idea of having the courage to be normal and finding happiness in the present moment.
Yeah.
And this seems to kind of push back against our culture's obsession with, being exceptional and achieving all these extraordinary things.
It does. And it's a really refreshing message, I think. We live in this world where we're constantly bombarded with images of people who are, incredibly successful or beautiful or talented.
Right. And it makes us feel like we have to measure up.
Exactly.
So what does it mean to have the courage to be normal?
Well, it's about accepting yourself as you are without feeling the need to be special or superior to others. It's about finding contentment in the everyday moments without constantly striving for something more.
So it's not about being mediocre or giving up on our goals.
And not at all.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that our worth isn't dependent on those external achievements or comparisons. It's about finding joy in the process of living.
And the book also talks about this idea of living in the here and now, right?
Yeah, it does.
It's like that saying, life is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah, it's about being present in each moment rather than constantly focusing on the past or worrying about the future.
And it's interesting, the book even suggests that life doesn't have some inherent meaning. It's not like there's some grand purpose that's already laid out for us.
Right.
It's up to us to create our own meaning.
Yeah. And that can be both liberating and terrifying at the same time.
It is. It's a lot of responsibility.
But it's also a lot of freedom, right?
Yeah.
Because it means we're not bound by some predetermined script.
We get to write our own story.
Exactly.
And happiness then is defined as the feeling of contribution.
Yeah, it's that sense of being useful, of making a difference in the world, even if it's just in our own small corner of it.
So it's not about what we get, it's about what we give.
And it's not about seeking recognition or praise for those contributions either.
Right. It's about the intrinsic satisfaction of knowing that you've made a positive impact.
And that brings us full circle back to that idea of freedom in our relationships.
Right.
When we're not constantly seeking validation from others, we're free to contribute authentically and to find true happiness in those connections.
It's all interconnected, isn't it?
It is.
It's amazing. Well, this has been a really incredible deep dive into the courage to be disliked and into the ideas of Adlerian psychology. It's a different way of thinking about the world and ourselves.
It is.
It's about letting go of those things that are holding us back.
The past, the the expectations of others, those feelings of inferiority.
And embracing the present moment.
Yeah, and finding the courage to be ourselves, even if it means not everyone's going to like us.
And finding that sense of belonging and purpose through contributing to our communities.
And it's not always easy to put these ideas into practice.
No, it's definitely a journey.
But it's a journey worth taking, I think.
I agree. So for you, the listener, I want you to think about those areas of your life where you feel most stuck or unhappy.
Yeah.
Are you letting the past dictate your present? Are you too focused on what other people think? And what are those things that you could be contributing to your community that would bring you a sense of purpose and fulfillment?
Those are some big questions.
They are, but I think they're worth asking.
And if this deep dive has sparked your interest, we really encourage you to pick up a copy of The Courage to be Disliked.
Yeah.
And maybe even explore some other works on Adlerian psychology. There's so much to learn, and it's a really empowering philosophy, I think.
Absolutely.